Today I'm going to talk about the double standard in thinking as it relates to people who are in recovery with alcohol or substance use disorders, basically drug addiction. Those who may not be in recovery but may be thinking about it, or individuals who've been kind of in and out of treatment, and some of you may be in treatment yourself right now. And for people who work in the profession, I want to talk about what can happen in terms of resistance that you get working with individuals in recovery or who are seeking treatment in regards to distortions, thinking errors, being antagonistic towards the treatment process, and double standard type thinking that often sometimes is not pointed out, and there's sometimes it can be necessary to point out the contradictions in individuals' thinking or that double standard to help people with their insight. So I want to talk about the issue of money, and this is something, a topic that really you could talk about healthcare and treatment in general, but I'm going to keep it specifically focused to individuals with alcohol use or substance use disorders, drug addiction, whether it be methamphetamines, opioids, opiates, heroin, illicitly prescribed opiates, cocaine, and so on. You get the idea. Alcohol as well. Many drugs out there, pick one. So in my 20 plus years, I've worked in the mental health and substance rehabilitation fields. Both those, they tend to go a bit hand in hand. I've worked in the industry for over 20 years now. In inpatient psychiatric hospitals, supported residential treatment centers, supported residential for both mental health and substance use rehabilitation. And I've worked for a few state agencies, and also a medication assistant treatment program, as it's called, for people with opioid use disorder or dependence, heroin addicts, illicit opioids, and so on. And in these programs, you encounter individuals that are at different stages of their recovery. And I'm not going to use a broad brush here and say all addicts in recovery are the same way, because they're not. You have individuals, the ones I'm going to talk about really are the ones who still have ambivalence about wanting to change. That's the real issue. The issue is a shift in their values, what they believe, and where they assign the worth. And in this video, we're going to talk about money. You know, everyone here watching this video, anyone who's been in any kind of treatment, all of us, the evidence for where we assign our worth and what we value can be indicated in how we spend our time, how we spend our energy, our resources, that also include money, and where we place that. What are we spending it on? You know, what are we putting our energy into? That is an indication of what we value. So we're going to talk about that with people in recovery and look at some double standards as far as treatment is concerned. So what I have noticed, and I've encountered this in my 20 years or more, is that you'll hear sometimes from individuals that view treatment as antagonistic rather, or pessimistic. They have a negative way of framing treatment. So they'll say, you only care because you're paid to be here. Or all you guys care about is the money, right? So who hasn't heard that before, who's worked in healthcare, mental health, substance use, and so on? You'll hear that. And what I like to respond to that is with a few different angles I like to hit on. Now, if you have rapport with somebody, you can address it in different ways based on how well you know the individual. Sometimes, you can't just be blatantly, brutally too honest, too quick, too soon with individuals depending on where they're at, because they're not going to receive it anyways depending on how sick they are at the moment. So when you get individuals, when they're starting to come out of the compulsive drug use in terms of them being medically stable, and they're no longer in danger of acute withdrawals and feeling physically sick anymore, they still have a transition period in recovery, but essentially they're medically stable, and they're in a position now to move forward with treatment and start making a change in the way they live their life, or to relapse to old behaviors and go back to using illicit drugs. So you have someone in a crossroads. So in these situations where I've worked with individuals and they're right there, they're medically stable, They're not having to compulsively go use drugs anymore because they either are on medication assistance treatment, on a stable dose of medication, so they can abstain from illicit drugs. They'll be fine, medically speaking. So you're really looking then at the drug-seeking type of behaviors and other motivating factors. For alcohol, once they're stable and they're no longer in danger of seizures and DTs and so on, they are now at a crossroads at looking at a change in behavior or going back to the same vicious cycle again. So what does money have to do with any of this? Well, money, unfortunately, can be a big distraction for people who are contemplating going into treatment or contemplating whether they should stay in treatment, because they turn the issue of money into a permission statement to quit treatment. So they'll say, well, this cost me money to be here. So where you have situations where individuals are required to either participate in the cost of their treatment or to even pay for it, like with private facilities that are not necessarily nonprofits, they either take a private pay, essentially you're paying out of your pocket, or you have insurance that's going to cover a portion or all of the cost of your treatment. So in these situations, you will run into people that will use that issue to distract from their responsibility for them being responsible for their program of recovery. So in the medication assistance treatment programs, I've heard from individuals, you just sell drugs here, and you just care about money. You're just drug dealers, like the people on the street selling drugs. So you'll hear that sometimes. And so what you got to understand is, in a medication assistance treatment program, the individuals are seen and supervised by a medical doctor. They have a counselor that they work on as far as having a treatment plan based on their goals, relapse prevention, case management, and so they have really a program of recovery in place that is comprehensive, that entails various aspects. The issue is that individuals need to own their program of recovery. It's got to be theirs. And so when you have resistance in the beginning, the issue of money can come up, and they'll use that just to try to distract from the issues of them confronting their lifestyle and the need to make changes. So what I often will hear a lot of, unfortunately, from these type of individuals, is the accusation that people who are counselors, whether or doctors or nurses, or people who work in this field for mental health, substance use, and rehabilitation, is that we only care because we're paid to be there, or we only care about our paychecks, or the agency itself only cares about the money, right? So the contradiction I point out is this. On one hand, you have an antagonistic view towards treatment that's being used to distract and, unfortunately, sometimes to drop out of treatment or to relapse. And on the other hand, though, I rarely, if ever, hear an addict in recovery complain about the drug dealers. Because guess what? The drug dealers charge them money for those drugs and are making a profit off of their suffering and their addiction and their lifestyle they're caught up in. That drug dealer 100% is exploiting them, and I assure you, the drug dealer does not care about them. On the other hand, of treatment, the expectation of treatment is harm reduction, ultimately for an individual in recovery to get their health back, improve the quality of life, and to be healthy, and it's to your benefit. The other end of the spectrum with the drug dealer, illicit and illegal, the benefit to risk ratio, there is no benefit. It's all risk, tremendous risk to your health, legal risk, you go to jail, and so on. And any perceived benefit may be temporary if it's someone who's just trying to not get dope sick, and that's talking about the compulsive drug use because they're trying to avoid withdrawal. So as far as a compulsive drug addict, once they're in recovery, and again, as I mentioned earlier, and are medically stable, whether it's through assistance on medication or they've made it into the clear long enough, maybe they're having some post-acute withdrawal, transitioning issues such as getting their mood stabilized, their sleep is getting back to normal again, and so on. There are some transitions that can be expected in recovery, 6 months to up to a year, for people who have been using drugs for a long time. The brain has to get back into balance. So the issue of change is that the brain is flexible. It's not set in stone that the brain becomes stuck. Yes, the brain does become reinforced. We can talk about dopamine and the connection there of drugs and that reinforcement factor to compulsively use drugs and neural pathways and neural pruning and so on. The thing is that the brain can be reconditioned to go the other direction too. Psychotherapy and counseling has been proven to help reroute the brain neural pathways. The thing is that a person has to be a part of that process. You have to have a desire to change and be active in making lifestyle changes to start helping retrain your brain, retrain your lifestyle, and so on. You're not stuck forever, but it takes work to go in a different direction. So the money issue is not an excuse, and let's talk more about that to keep the focus on the topic of the video. So we all spend money, time and energy and resources on activities we like. Let's talk just a general healthcare conversation. I know people who will spend $5,000 fixing up a hot rod car. They'll spend thousands of dollars on the best fishing pole and tackle to go fishing. I know people who will spend thousands on tattoos, getting their arms sleeved up. You get it. You get the idea. People spend a lot of money on things that they assign worth and value to that gives them satisfaction. So these same individuals will go to a dentist, for example, and need to get their teeth examined, get a teeth cleaning, and find out it might cost around $500 for them to get their teeth taken care of because they haven't been to a dentist in 5 years. So yeah, they need to get their teeth cleaned. They might need a fill-in, something to that effect. And they will complain, wow, this dentist cost me $500. So what that's indicating for these individuals is that, well, I guess the car, the fishing poles, or the tattoos are worth more to them than their teeth, which is it's what it is. It's what you how you view your relationship with money to things does indicate where you're placing the value. You can say you care about your health all day long, but it's where you're investing your energy and your time and what your activities will be the evidence if you care about your health. So let's look at recovery, ambivalence to change, and the evidence for recovery. The basis for that is a shift and a change in your values and where you assign your worth. Your desire to become healthy, to stay in recovery, will be evidenced by a change in the way you're living your life, period. If you're saying you want to be in recovery, but you're making no changes, then it's superficial. There's no evidence for it. The evidence is change, results, right? So people talk about wanting results. Well, that applies to a lot of things. So in terms of the values and the priorities, sometimes people get in a debate about the disease, addiction being a disease, or it's a choice, and so on. And a lot gets lost, unfortunately, in that debate. And with me, I do recognize that like a disease, addiction is progressive and developmental over time. And if not treated, it can get worse and you can die like a disease. It's progressive and developmental in nature. There's many different types of diseases, and so to just lump it and compare it to every single one is really not an accurate statement. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. To go extreme in either direction is a disservice to someone in recovery. The reality is that you got to address all components. Yes, if you're an addict in recovery or you're thinking about going into recovery, there are physical things, medically speaking, you'll need help with, and that will need to be addressed. However, that by itself alone is not going to keep you in recovery. People go into recovery, or for detox only rather, they come out, they're medically stable, but their values have not changed. The way they think, the way they deal with relationships, the way they manage stress, coping skills, none of that has changed. Any internal, external triggers for using drugs, has not been dealt with. So these individuals will go back. If they're just doing a detox, medically speaking, so they are not sick or in any type of medical danger. So that, yes, it has some physiological aspects that got to be dealt with. Does that mean it's completely without any type of responsibility? No, the individual has a lot of responsibility, And there are many things that are within control of an individual that have to do with choice, making choices and making decisions. So it's in the middle. It's not an extreme one way or the other. So these making choices, yes, relapsing and going back to an old way is a choice. That's not a disease forcing somebody to go back. Not if you have gotten to a program of recovery. You work your program of recovery by taking responsibility for managing your situations, your relationships, changing the way you live your life. For those who may disagree, I am going to have to disagree back with you, because I know way too many people that were caught up in hardcore compulsive drug use, very serious addiction, who've been in recovery for 20 years or more now, and they're doing excellent. And the deciding factor was a change in their values, what became important to them, assigning worth to those types of situations. Their mind followed, their resources followed, their energy all followed into that end, and they're still in recovery to this day based on choices and decisions they made moving forward in their life. So when we look at this situation with money and priorities and so on, they go hand in hand. I understand that when people were caught up in illicit drug use, using heroin, methamphetamines, illicit drugs like benzodiazepines, if they're not prescribed, it's illicit. It kind of goes hand in hand with other drugs and polysubstance use. So individuals will commit illegal type activities. Men and women will prostitute themselves, steal, robbery, commit crimes, burglary of habitation. Not uncommon to see that as a conviction that an addict has had in the past. Unfortunately, they're stealing to sell things for money, to pay the drug dealer, to get their daily fixes of illicit drugs. And individuals can spend $80 to $200 a day. That's nothing. So when we look at this antagonism, back to that, I rarely, if ever, hear an individual who has this pattern of complaining about the money. I rarely, if ever, have heard them complain and say, that damn drug dealer, all they care about is the money. I don't hear that. In fact, I've heard the opposite. It's almost like the drug dealer is the hero. Well, I'll just stop coming here then. I'll just go back to my dealer. Like the dealer is their safe fell, or they're kind of like their bailout, almost in a positive light. They're viewing the drug dealer in a better light. So that is part of that thinking errors they have, that double standard, and unfortunately them not having the insight or the ambivalence to change. They're aware, but they don't want to recognize it, that there's a big difference in the two situations. In the situation with the drug dealer absolutely is just in for the money, is exploiting them for the profit financially, doesn't care about them if they overdose or die. They're just a number, and coming into them, and they're nothing else beyond that. They're just numbers. It makes them money. So the drug dealer, them staying in business is contingent or dependent upon the drug addict staying addicted to the drugs, or better yet, returning customers by relapsing. So it's just a constant flow of cash for these individuals. Not to mention the risk that comes to people caught up in addiction, to themselves, their health. If they're using IV drugs, drug use intravenously rather, injecting. A lot of times these individuals are, not using sterile syringes, or engaging in, harmful behaviors to themselves because of the compulsive drug use and caught up in that. So as mentioned before, there's differences on both ends. In one situation, the drug dealer absolutely is exploiting them, doesn't care about the addict. The addict is not getting any benefit out of that. Maybe in their mind, is to not get dope sick. That's about it. Everything else is just harm and risk. The expectation of treatment, however, is that you get healthy, stay well, improve your quality of life, and financially is way less. The MAP program I've worked in was $60 to $70 a week. So $240 to $280 a month, which includes a doctor, nurse care, case management, having a counselor, and your medication, all of that included per month is this, do the math. That which is to your benefit, to get healthy, to gain control of your life, versus the other end having to come up with $80 to $200 per day to give to a drug dealer that don't give a shit about you. So logically, this makes sense for people who have been, have their mind about them. They're not caught up in compulsive drug use. For people that have ambivalence because they may be medically stable because they detoxed and with assistance through medication, they don't have to physically use anymore to avoid getting sick. They still haven't changed their thinking yet. They're still in recovery. So in my other video, I talked about what constitutes recovery. I talked about people who've been locked up in prison 4 or 5 years in a controlled environment, and these individuals were not able to use. When they got out, they were medically fine, physically healthy, but they truly were not in recovery because abstinence alone doesn't constitute recovery. It's a change in values and thinking. So those are some things I wanted to hit on in this video. That double standard. I've worked in the field for over 20 years now. I'm also a personal trainer as well, and I just consider myself a wellness professional. So some of you who are watching this video, maybe you've worked in the rehabilitation field. You may have encountered some of this antagonistic, view towards treatment from people who are in recovery. They view it as, they only care about the money, or they're only paid to be here. So if you're someone who's thinking about getting into treatment, and maybe you may have to participate in some of the cost of your treatment, it's worth it. Your health is worth it, and your life is worth it. Think of all the money you or other individuals have spent on other things. So your life is worth it, and if it is an issue of life or death. So if you need help getting into a treatment program, there's nonprofits pretty much in every state, federally funded type grants that go in there. The SAMHSA website, you can look that up or Google it, and you can find treatment programs in your area. I've never met anyone who asked for help where I live that was not able to get into a treatment program. They might have had to get on a list, but within a reasonable amount of time, they got into treatment. And they might have used in the in-between time, but that as compared to continuing to use for another 10, 20 years, whatever, and then, or worse, die of an overdose, it's a no-brainer. And different treatment programs, different requirements, and everybody's needs are different. Some people may go inpatient detox for a short period of time to be medically stable, and then you just go to an outpatient partial type program for individuals who are caught up with opioid addiction. You might go through a medication assistance treatment program. There's methadone, buprenorphine, enoxaparin, and other medications that individuals may use for a period of time to be functionable and not be high, but be functionable and abstain from other drugs, not be sick, and be able to focus on work, education, so on, get their life back together essentially. So different situations for different people. So let's not use the fact that people get paid for what they do in the healthcare profession, mental health, substance use. Don't use it as a distraction. That's more about you if you're someone watching this video who's in recovery and you're going to complain that you have to pay money towards your treatment and it costs money. That's more of a distraction. Ask yourself, what's that really saying? How serious are you about yourself? How much do you value your health? How much do you want to live? And for the excuse that, if I get legit, get clean, and I'm not doing illegal things no more, I'm not going to make the same amount of money I used to. I used to make $200, $300 every day, right? For some of these individuals. Well, it all has to do with what you value once again. You may have made $200, $300 a day when you're using drugs illicitly, but at what cost to your health? And all that money went to what end? To be in a chaotic life where you're just chasing the next fix and living in chaos, and often for some individuals being caught up in the legal system. So humble yourself. Humble yourself. If you got to find yourself going clean, to get your sobriety, and because you're in a treatment program, you're not going to be doing the things you used to be. And so what if you get a job that doesn't pay a lot of money? Humble yourself for a temporary period of time so you can have the rest of your life back. You can, get yourself in a position to where long term down the road, you can be in a very good job. You might go back to school for those of you who haven't, furthered your education. Or for those of you who have good job skills but were not able to capitalize on it because of your addiction, you'll be able to return to doing some of the things you did before and be legitimate, legal, make good money, and have a quality of life. And regardless of how much money you make, at the end of the day, it's about your quality of life, having your health, your sanity. There's no price on that. Health is the first wealth. And there's not enough money in the world that would get me to give up my health. I don't care how much it is. I would rather work as a counselor or a personal trainer, make a decent living, feel good about what I do, wake up in the morning not looking over my shoulder, and so on. So those are my thoughts. There's a lot of things that could be said. Probably a few things on my little note list I made here that I might have missed, but the theme you'll hear me talk about in this series of recovery I'm going to be doing is a shift in your values. That's what it boils down to. Because when it comes to money, back to the money topic, you can spend $1 million on a person. Doesn't matter if they're not ready to change up here. So recovery is not about the money. There's many paths to recovery. I've known many individuals, you can call them warriors, if you will, who became sober no matter what it took. They didn't care, what the barrier was. They were going to do whatever is necessary to get their life back. And I see a lot of that too. I see a lot of people in recovery that it's inspiring when you see people go through the steps to do what they need to do to regain control of their life, to see them become healthy again, see them prosper, and to be a totally different person in 6 months, a year later. It's like, wow, amazing difference if you just look at the change in these individuals and the gratitude that they have once they get out of that fog and they make it far enough. So people in recovery do need help, and we need to offer them help, but also we need to be honest and help them to focus as far as what it boils down to is that it's okay to tell a person in recovery, that they have a responsibility, and it's okay to have conversations about what they value and to call them out on when they're using things as a distraction or permission statements or distortions and rationalizations. If we care, we're going to do those things. The easy thing is to tell people what they want to hear and just go home about your business. I'm good, I'm healthy, I'm going to go home and sleep good, so I can make my job easy and just tell people what they want to hear. But because I do care and I do want to see people get better, I tell people the truth. I tell them what they need to hear, because the basis for change is making decisions off of what is true. And that's where I make the effort to work off of when I'm trying to give helpful feedback. So these are my 2 cents on this topic. There's a lot to be said about people who are caught up in the compulsive part of addiction, where they are compulsively just having to go out and do whatever to chase their next fix because they don't want to get sick. We can talk about how the brain is affected and so on once people are in a very harmful state of addiction. That's a different video. What I'm talking about in this video is that, yes, people need intervention at certain points for certain people to get stable, but once people are medically stable, they don't have to chase that next fix no more. And what they're really looking at now is changing the way they live their life so they can continue to get their life back. Is what's going to be the barrier to that. It's going to be the way they think about their treatment, how they view treatment. Do they view it as a tool? Do they view medication as a tool, or it's just another drug? So the steering wheel for recovery is up here. And that's what we got to do, is help people with how they frame their situation. One of the permission statements I hear a lot when people will relapse is that they'll say, back to the money issue, is that, well, it didn't cost me any money. I didn't have to pay for the methamphetamine. It was there, and it was at a barbecue, whatever, a birthday party. It was a birthday party, a celebration. Talking about triggers, or permission statements, and plus it was free. I didn't pay for it, so heck, that makes it okay, or I should do it. So that these types of things, examples of, I'll probably talk about in another video. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you had to pay for it or not. It's about what you value. It's what you value in terms of your decision making and what you're going to do and how you're going to manage a situation. And just like with treatment, you may have to pay for part of it or all of it, or maybe you'll be fortunate enough that a program like a grant has a grant that can pay for your treatment, or maybe you have insurance. But you got to be invested in your recovery from in some capacity, whether it's the financial part, definitely emotionally, psychologically, and mentally. That has to be there. You have to have that commitment. So either way, if you're having to participate in those costs or not, don't let that be a distraction. You feel yourself getting frustrated, and you want to make it about that, ask yourself, what's the real issue? Talk about that. Maybe that's a way for you to put other things on the table that need to come out and be discussed. So until I make another video, feel free to leave some comments below. Subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. Again, my name's James Hunter. This is my 2 cents topic channel. It's like a variety. As I mentioned before, I'm a personal trainer. I've been in the mental health and substance rehabilitation fields for over 20 years, and fitness as well. So those are my disciplines, and I just believe in an overall view of life as it relates to being healthy. It's not just physical. I believe in the mental aspects and so on, spiritual. And I'll be kind of having to do different videos based on the different discussions that can be had. So I hope this video gets you to think. For those of you who are in recovery, that's awesome. And those of you who are thinking about it, and maybe you're resentful that you may have to pay something, give you something to think about. Your life is worth it, and if you want to have the best life possible that you deserve, then it's worth the investment. Until I talk to you again, take care.